Hello. This video is your introduction to putting images on web pages. So I'm going to talk about the tag. I'm also going to talk about the file extensions, file sizes, image size in pixels, width and height, and block versus inline behavior. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the SVG format, but I'm not going to go into responsive images yet because you haven't studied CSS yet. So to begin, the 4 image formats that you really need to worry about today are JPEG, PNG, GIF, some people say GIF, I say GIF, and SVG. Robbins mentions 2 others, the WebP format and the JPEG XR format. Now, I don't think they're worth talking about yet because the support for them in browsers is really minimal, as you can see from the well-known caniuse.com site. When you look up file formats, HTML tags, CSS selectors, properties, values, anything that you want to find out whether it's really safe to use for most people in most browsers today, caniuse.com is a really excellent resource. And when you see a lot of red boxes on Caniuse, like you do here, that means browser support is really not very strong yet. Now, Robbins calls the file extensions suffixes. I'm not sure why, but I call them file extensions. So just like .html, we've got these 4 file extensions, .jpeg, .png, .gif, and .svg. And you can save an image in one of these file formats even if you got the image in a different format. That's perfectly okay. But you can't just change the file extension name. That doesn't work. That doesn't change it to another format. You actually have to convert it by saving it as the other format. So you can easily do that in Photoshop, and you can do that in other programs as well. As a rule of thumb, you are going to always save any photo in the JPEG format. It's a better format because it compresses it, it makes a better file size result so that you aren't making people download a file that's bigger than it needs to be. It uses compression techniques that make photos look good even while it's making them smaller. You are going to usually save flat color graphics as PNGs in the PNG format. Especially you want to make sure that you're saving as PNG 8 and not PNG 24. PNG 24 is going to be a much, much larger file size. Now, if an image is some kind of illustration, painting with a gradient or with a lot of subtle coloring, it's probably better to save it as a JPEG. It will probably give you a smaller file size. At the same time, it gives you a better image quality as opposed to saving that as a PNG. So it's not just non-photos are saved as PNGs. If it has subtle coloring, it should be a JPEG, even though it's an illustration or a painting. So to demonstrate to you what I mean about file size, I downloaded a copy of this famous painting, Las Meninas, from the museum website. And from that original, I saved a portion of it as a JPEG image at 60% quality, and I saved the same portion as a PNG 8. And so when you look at these, and even if we zoom in very, very closely, you're not going to be able to see much difference. Of course, certainly not in the video, but even if you were looking at the files themselves, you won't see that much difference visually between the JPEG image on the left and the PNG image on the right. But where you will see the difference, and this is what I mean by file size, is the PNG image that was saved is 551 kilobytes. That's over half a megabyte. whereas the JPEG that was saved, that looks the same, that's the same dimensions in pixels, width and height, is 154 kilobytes. So the JPEG file is about a quarter of the size of the PNG file. And this is quite important on the web because remember that people are downloading your images. They're possibly paying for data. They're certainly waiting. You're likely to have a number of images on a page. So all those images that are downloading, whether they're 100 kilobytes each or a megabyte each one is a separate request to the server, and they're all downloading all that data. So your ability to choose the right file format and to save an image in a way that minimizes the file size, it's an important part of doing web development. So how we insert an image into HTML. We don't actually put the file into the HTML because, of course, the HTML is text, it's code. But in the image element, the IMG element, we specify the location of the image that we're inserting. We are also required to provide an ALT attribute, and the text value of that ALT attribute must convey the same information and function as the image itself. So think about how the alt text would sound if it were read aloud, and it's not a caption, but it should be enough to tell us what is in the image or what the image is trying to tell us. So let's look at an image element in the context of a regular HTML document. So we've got a complete document here, and the page looks like this. So there are two images. There's a big photo. There's a small one at the bottom. And I want you to notice, definitely look at the alt element and the alt text. Yes, this is a photo of men and camels in the desert. By placing the image element between the H1 and the P, both of which are block elements, the image appears to act as a block. So you see the H1 above it, you see text below it. But the fact is that images, by default, are inline elements, not block elements. So I want to demonstrate that with the small camel at the bottom. Small camel is in an image element that is below the final paragraph. So it looks like a block because it's outside of a paragraph. But what if I delete that with Command X and I insert it right here after the word camels inside the second paragraph? And I save and I reload, and the camel is now in line with the text. I haven't changed the properties of the image at all. I just inserted it between some words in a paragraph. So this demonstrates that images are inline elements. You can change this with CSS. You can change a block to inline or an inline to a block. But let me also show you what will happen if you try to place an image within text and the browser width or the device width is not quite what you might have thought. So I'm going to take the camel out from where I put it, and I am going to instead put it right here after the word water. Save, reload. And if I change the width of the browser, you're going to see how that image moves along with the text so that wherever the text goes, the image travels in line with it. It stays exactly where I put it, but there is an unsightly gap between the first line of the paragraph and the second line because the camel is just taking up as much space as he needs. Now, we need to talk about image size. This is not the same as file size, right? File size is measured in megabytes, kilobytes. size of the file, but the image size is measured in pixels. And so the width of the image might be 500 pixels, 1,000 pixels, depending, right? You can change the width and height of a photo by editing it and resaving it in an image editing program, such as Photoshop, but there are also others. What you need to understand is that pixel width of your image is also related to the width of the device and the width of the browser window. So I've got the picture of camels that you've already seen right here, and when I saved it in Photoshop, I saved it with a width of 1,000 pixels, and proportionately the height automatically came in at 580. But the original of that image, which is here, which I took on an iPhone, the original image was much bigger. And you can see that it was more than 3,000 pixels wide, width is always the first measurement, and more than 1,700 pixels high. So what if I put this image on my page instead of the one that we've got? Here's the one we've got. I'm going to substitute in the original image, save, and reload. And it is insanely large because my laptop screen is not 3,000 pixels wide. It's, I think it's 2,000 and something. So this image is just too big. And this is a common beginner mistake. I'm about to show you the mistake. The beginner says, oh, I just need to change the dimensions in the HTML. And I cleverly figured out I can do that by putting in a height. So let me make it smaller. Let me say it's 500 instead of 3,000. And that appears to work. We reload and we say, ah, yes, that's nice. It's not wider than my browser anymore. But the problem here is that image that you just manipulated in HTML, that image is still 1.6 megabytes in file size. It's 10 times larger as a file download than the version that I saved at an appropriate width of 1,000 instead of 3,000. So I'm taking off this bogus bad height attribute, and I'm changing the image back to the appropriately sized one, reloading my page, and I urge you to never force people to download files that are larger than what they really need. My final topic in this video is the SVG file format. And I happen to have an SVG file here in my images folder. And if you've read Robbins, Chapter 7, you will know that SVG files are not image files made of pixels, but in fact, they are text files made out of code. So this SVG file is an insanely huge amount of code. And you're probably saying, whoa, where did that come from? Well, I went to a site that has a lot of SVG logos that you can download. And I went into a logo that has an image of a penguin because the penguin is the mascot of Linux. And I opened up the image alone and I hit the little download button, and I got the SVG file that you just saw in my Atom text editor. Now, the guy who made this site used this free graphics editor to build his SVG files. And SVGs are important because when you use the SVG code directly in your HTML, that code can be manipulated in real time And this ability is at the heart of one of the most popular data visualization libraries called D3. D3 is used to make all kinds of amazing interactive charts and graphics and even maps. And just as one little example, this is code. There is SVG code, and when I grab a dot and pull it around, there's JavaScript operating mathematically in the background, making these animations that you see happen. I'm going to show you two different ways that you can add an SVG image into your HTML. So one is to select all the code in an SVG code file and copy it and paste it directly into your HTML document. And save and reload. And there you've got Tux, the Linux penguin. Now, another way to do it, we will undo that. We will type a normal image tag with SRC and ALT. And in here, we will give the path to the SVG file. And ALT. And it's probably going to look, yep, exactly the same, just to show that that was not a trick. I will put it down here below, save, reload. And because the SVG file is not going to get any smaller or any bigger no matter what you do, you are stuck with that big file full of code, it is actually okay to throw in a width element, because you're not making people download a bigger or smaller file. The SVG file is the same size no matter what. SVGs have a lot of uses. If you find that your needs are perfectly well served by JPEGs and PNGs, that's totally fine. You don't need to use SVGs. This concludes our video about images, file sizes, image file formats, and so on.